people have heard of the mole hole? That's good. At least we got some people. Uh, Up here, where did it go? It's not there. Oh, there we go. So this is an article that was taken out of the local newspaper right after the base in 1987. It says the boss of the Blytheville Air Force Base 97th Bomb Wing had referenced the alert crew readiness facility, that mound, multi-mouth structure that sits far from another mound, also built by and for warriors, the old Chickasabwa Indian mound, just off the air base and the highway. So what you have here on the lower left is the bermed embankment for the alert center, and just less than a half a mile south of that is the old Chickasabwa mound for a mound building group of Mississippian Indians during that period. Sort of put it in perspective. The location, this is Blytheville, also known as Eaker Air Force Base. It was renamed in 1989 in hopes that the renaming of the base to be Eaker would help save the base from BRAC, and it did not work. So this is just a little bit of Blytheville. So the Blytheville Air Force Base Alert Center and Alert Apron was constructed as part of a national expansion of the Strategic Air Command facilities across the United States and its territories to help in creating a program to safeguard nuclear deterrence. Though arriving late to the Strategic Air Command's Bomber Alert program, the Blytheville Air Alert Center and Alert Pad provided another installation that was able to augment SAC's already strong ability to establish a one-third strike force to provide counterattacks within 15 minutes. It is through the constant efforts of SAC and its airmen of the bomber fleet was considered the backbone of the SAC deterrent posture. And I'm sorry for the missile guys. That's not what I believe, it's just what they say. For almost 34 years, the area was a distinction of being one of the highest security chunks of concrete imaginable. The Blytheville Air Force Base SAC Alert area is located east of the southern end of the runway, situated at the center of the fenced area along the alert parking area. A taxiway to the southern end of the apron joins the Blytheville Air Force Base alert area to the main runway, which allows bombers and tankers with the quickest access to that runway. Positioned around the apron are the Crew Readiness Center, also known as the Mole Hole or the Alert Facility. The Alert Aircraft Parking Apron, also known as the Christmas Tree or Chevron. The Security Police Entry Control Building, the Security Gate, the Electric Powered Station, the Master Surveillance and Control Tower, the Alert Fire Team Facility, small guard shacks, small shelters, alert space, basketball court, swimming pool, etc., along with the security fence. These guys that were stationed out here were here 7 days a week, 24/7, waiting for the klaxon to go off to go over the North Pole at that point in time. So these guys had everything possible to maintain a somewhat normal life living within this very secure area. So that's why you have the swimming pool and the basketball court. Located adjacent to the alert area is the weapons storage area, which is a highly secure area as well. This area contains berm storage igloos, multiple cubicle magazine storage buildings, surveillance inspection shops, surveillance towers, command and control buildings, along with the security and guard fence in the entrapment area. The third area, located within the current Blytheville Air Force Base Historic District, which we got listed in 2018, is the Family Visitation Area. Now, the service members that were out here did not call this the Family Visitation Center. They locally will name this the Family Planning Area for folks to come and visit. The Family Visitation Area was constructed between the middle of the 1970s through the middle of the 1980s, and it provided a place for families and air crew to see their husbands and fathers during their alert rotation. The combination of these three areas being intact is almost unprecedented at any other site throughout the United States. The alert facility, Alert Pad, has been raised to make way for many of the alert facilities on many of the active bases and those that have been deactivated. The former Blytheville/Eaker Air Force Base has been a very intact area, making it a great place to try to interpret life at this point in time for the men, women, and families who sacrificed years living under the auspice of the Cold War. The Blytheville Air Force Base was constructed beginning in May of 1942, with completion by December 3rd of 42, so the entire base was constructed in very little time, as a twin-engine aircraft base for bomber pilots. However, by the late 1945, the war in Europe was over, and there was little need for so many bombers, and the base was then deactivated. By 1953 to 1955, there was no question that TAC would be stationed out of the newly reactivated base, which was reactivated in 53. In July of 1955, the United States Air Force reassigned the Blytheville Air Force Base to the Tactical Air Command, better known as TAC, to house the new B-57. However, the Air Force had realized that the B-57 was not a good plane for low-level bombing runs, which was part of its mission. It quickly decided to discontinue this from the Air Force, which left the newly opened base without a plane to fly. In 1957, the report was submitted by the United States Air Force that would transfer the Blytheville Air Force Base from TAC to the Strategic Air Command, better known as SAC, effective in 1959. 15 B-52s and a squadron of aerial tankers would be replacing the B-57. The National Register nomination for the historic district says, throughout the Cold War period, this combination of nuclear-armed submarines, missiles, and bombers would become known as a triad of deterrence. The bombers would eventually be on alert and housed at the crew readiness facility, and the bombers would be housed out on the apron. It would become the cornerstone of the deterrence and help keep the Soviet Union at arm's length, the eventual show of force. Eventually, the United States turned to SAC to be the center point of the nuclear bomber program for the triad of deterrence and its alert program. Again, it is noted in the original session that it stands to reason that the brunt of initial attack would be directed against SAC, because the Soviets know only too well the price they would have to pay for aggression that would be unacceptable to them unless they needed to succeed in preventing SAC's strike force to be launched. As long as the Soviets knew that, no matter what means they had to employ to stop it, a sizable percentage of SAC's strike force would be in the air with a counterattack within minutes of the initial aggression. They would have to think twice before undertaking such an aggressive maneuver. As part of the retrofitting of the base from TAC to SAC, new infrastructure was needed to align with SAC's new mission. These new buildings included the alert crew readiness facility, the alert pad, the support structures, and the weapons storage area. SAC alert facilities were composed of two major parts: the bomber alert facility, which held the crews, and the alert apron itself, where the aircraft were constantly on standby. The development of the crew readiness facility was in response to the Killian Report, a document completed in 1954 to assess what is going on. There we go. 1954 to assess the nation's ability to deter the attacks by the Soviet Union. One suggestion made in the report was to disperse bombers across the United States and have pilots and crew members prepared to fly immediately in response to a Soviet attack. Maintaining such readiness required that an aircraft be positioned along the runway, ready to take off, and that the pilots and crews would be housed in a nearby facility. In the early 1950s, SAC officials studied different flight line configurations to help with the best possible facilitating a quick launch of the bombers. Originally, designers planned to do a standard stub plan, which you see there in the middle at Shepherd. However, due to the reduced timing to take off the stub design, it was no longer used. It's really hard to take a B-52 and make it go at a 90-degree angle, so it was never able to meet its 15-minute takeoff rule in order to get that going. So 90 degrees was not going to work. The original designers planned on that, but they later decided on the Christmas tree or the herringbone design, the style apron that would recognize SAC's alert aprons overall and would provide that faster takeoff. When combined with the close location of the crew readiness building, the 90-degree style would still remain at a few bases, though is phased out over time. In September of 1991, three major operational commands, TAC, SAC, and MAC, all would be inactivated due to restructuring. This inactivation of SAC in September of 1991 and the consistent questions about the retiring of the B-52 fleet, which is still in existence and heavily used, is all but closed the books on the Air Force activity at Blytheville Air Force Base. A glimmer of hope began again as word spread about a potential addition of a MX rail garrison, which may go in at Blytheville. Ultimately, the plan fell through, following cuts to defense budgets, with talks between the Soviet Union and the United States continuing. Then Congress also began to focus on the retirement of the B-52. The bomber and the expansion of a new B-1 bomber was about to take off. At the time the retirement talks were going on, Blytheville Air Force was continually told that they would remain open and there would be a shoe-in for the B-15 or for the B-1 bomber. This reassurance from members of Congress and from other states eased the anxiety of the civilians of Blytheville. Unfortunately, like everything else, the plan fell through and the base closed in 1992. Following the base realignment and closure at Eaker, or Blytheville Air Force Base, it forced Blytheville, which was an economically depressed, rural region without a firm economic structure to provide what the base provided. This closure frustrated citizens that had continually backed the base for over 40 years. In the years that followed, more lip service was paid to trying to find services that would help operate out of the former base, but then none of them ever materialized. There was a short glimpse of hope following the election of Bill Clinton for the reopening of the base, but all hopes were quickly extinguished. This left a large amount of animosity and hatred towards the Air Force Base and the federal government, and the continual promises that were made and broken over the ensuing decade. Though underlying distrust and activities still circle around the Air Force Base, like the B-52s and KC-135s, which used to be stationed out there, the winds are slowly changing. There is a new strong push to recognize the service of the former Blytheville Air Force Base, and the latest effort was spearheaded by several local activists that wanted to see the alert facility and the alert pad reused. The Arkansas Historic Preservation Program was contacted about promoting the history of the site, and staff members with the National Historic Landmark Program had been out on the site looking at a potential National Historic Landmark for the site. In these discussions, the National Register staff suggested that the National Register nomination be done first, in hopes of building that argument for a National Historic Landmark, and slowly work towards that. As we all know, grants sort of hinge on National Register listing. So it was like, let's get our foot in the door first, and then we'll work towards the NHL. So we'll see how that all sort of planned out. It was decided to go with that process, and included a process to make the alert pad a museum, with the visitation center being the guest offices, with a tour of the magazine and storage area for munitions. This area was officially listed to the National Register in January 26th of 2018. At the same time as the nomination was in process, other big events were already developing to help highlight the efforts being made in the resurrect parts of the base that were very special to those that lived out there. One such effort was the rededication of the Linebacker II Memorial and the Flag Plaza, which you can sort of see here in the lower left. Got a new paint job and some new restoration, and we had 500-600 people out there for this rededication. Community members and families of Linebacker II, those that didn't come back from Vietnam during that period. Also was there to do a groundbreaking for the Hulk 4-6 Memorial on the Memorial Plaza. This was attended by former base airmen and especially the community. The hard feelings and bad blood that once existed in mass throughout the city of Blytheville towards the former base is starting to wash off. The Hulk 4-6 Memorial is being designed by Washington State University students in their design and engineering program, as Lieutenant Eric Heaton, who was a member of the Hulk 4-6 that did not come back from Desert Storm, was actually a graduate of that program. So the students are looking at it as we're giving back to the community, and the community is looking at it as people are wanting to take interest in what we have here. And this is a photo of the Hulk 4-6 design that the students at Washington State University have put together. Following the acceptance of the National Register nomination, the group was spearheading the preservation efforts, commissioned Hardline Designs to do an architecture historic preservation and planning company out of Columbus, Ohio, to develop a renovation plan. The plan would be given to the Arkansas Aeroplex and is used for planning and restoration from here on out. So a lot of this information from here is their sort of design plan, so I'm just presenting it for them. As part of the conversation of the functioning of the museum space, incremental steps would need to be taken. This just happens to be the entrapment area. Hardline Designs proposed to be done with steps of priorities. It must be stated that the three main areas, the first one being the alert center itself, which is building 1225, and then the visitation area, and then the munitions area. However, much of the work of the conversion of the site circulates around the alert center and the alert pad itself. Therefore, Hardline Designs designated this priority one due to the initial need for both funds and foot traffic. Hardlines is suggesting that the exterior of the building be cleaned and make sufficient repairs to this space. The entry gate is also a very highly secure area, which we can see here. We'd love to be able to get that going again, make it operational. But Hardline Designs was also very focused on the fact that we have potholes in this area, which it's Arkansas, we have potholes everywhere. So it was sort of lower down on my priority list. The entry control gate is directly connected to the entrapment area itself, and both people and vehicles would be able to travel into this to get into the museum itself. A lot of the removal that we would have to do would just be clean up around the site from vandals, along with a lot of the vegetation. The exterior of the Alert Center is going to take far more funds in the entry control area, though funds are sought to help seal up the building with the largest portion. Vandals have done wonders on forcing issues into energy-efficient windows at this place. They broke them all out. It's hoped that the estimated price on just the alert pad itself is going to be about a $500,000 renovation project, with most of that being roof and exterior repair, with hopes that it's done by 2023. After gaining foot traffic and helping with rehabilitation of the alert building itself, the next priority would go to the Family Visitation Center. A lot of this building, the alert facility, had a 1985 addition, so we're trying to put that back to the way it looked originally. With the Alert Center rehabilitated, the main draw would then be sustaining at the time funds, which we all have problems with, and generating the facility to help rehabilitate in priority 4 with the Family Visitation Center. This just happens to be a plan of 1985 when they did an addition and sort of help with that layout. Some of the big parts would be adding a living room, dining room, and some facilities to help fixing that up to make it look like it did while it was being used. This is going to roughly cost about $1.8 million in order to get this up and going just on this part alone. The final priority is priority number 5, and it lists the construction of an RV park, fixing the perimeter of the fence, along with exterior lighting in order to keep that vandals out. It also would help with the outdoor pool, the basketball court, the sentry gates, the guard shacks, the alert fire team, and fixing the apron itself. The building would like to take a little more, including painting it, signage, and roof repair. The master control tower is still a site that has at least 3 phases that could work. One is just getting people to get to the tower. Another one would be able to let them get up into the tower, and another one would be having the controls fixed, at least have them functional inside that tower. And here's a picture of the tower. There's also the alert storage areas, the air-launched cruise missiles. If you can see in that picture right behind that red little Jeep, there's actually a Coca-Cola distribution center out of there. I won't drink Coke in Blytheville because those are what stored the nuclear weapons. I'm staying away from it. I always told them, I'm like, I'm not going to drink your Diet Coke, sorry. But to fix up this area is really roughly going to be about $4 million to put this storage area back to the way they really want it to go at that point in time. This is a big project. There's a difference between wants and needs, and this may not be essential. My opinion is the hardline designs with the perimeter fencing would be one of those that really needs to go up in order to keep vandals out and showing a priority to the folks that are around there that there's something going on, and to keep little vagrants out of the site. Even though the analysis of the site and costs associated with the project, it is again shown that the vision statement of Hardline Designs at Blytheville Welcome Center along I-55, just south of the Missouri border, reports that the most commonly asked question by visitors is whether there is anything to see at the old Air Force Base, to which they say no. Former workers stationed at the base often drive through the Aeroplex to look at the buildings and where they used to live. It is a source of fascination because it's both off limits while they were there for over 45 years, but also something they all wanted to see. Many of the residents who lived within the base over the years didn't know exactly what was going on within this very secure area. The base was housed in the nuclear weapons, which they were aware of but didn't know where they were at. The goal of the renovation of the master plan is to create a space that allows visitors to both learn about the experience and the frontline domestic defense during the Cold War. It's fine right there. Thank you, sir. The question of funding of the project will forever be discussed. Keep hitting the button. And what do we know for the first time since 1992? The citizens of Blytheville are starting to come around on the idea of cashing in on this great concrete resource that is the Alert area. This economically depressed area is looking for ways to capitalize on surrounding tourist designation and will be lack the projects to bring the tourists and tourist dollars. An entire doctorate program in heritage studies is located at Arkansas State University and could be a great resource to help garner attention for this site. Another great resource that could be garnered is the attention from other sites. Other great resources primed to help recognize the work that's going on at the ones that we've already heard from today, the Minuteman Missile Silo, as well as North Dakota, some of those places. Though it may be unrealistic to ask the citizens of Blytheville to pay for the renovation of the former Alert base, we need to know that the community is completely behind this project and that the renovations. We've heard, they've all heard it before, big ideas and big letdown. We've seen it come through with the federal government, governors that have promised things, presidents that have helped along the way, and lots of Fortune 500 companies that have come and gone. Be realistic. Do not promise things that you cannot provide on. Don't let people sit at the door. It's going to leave a lasting impression, is the one thing we figured out, is that the first people that are going to come through this door as a museum are going to have that lasting impression that's going to make or break the museum once it gets up and going. And that's one of the things we talked about last week in an envisioning session, was how are we going to make those great first impressions now and sort of have the community behind us from day one. You can strive, and the damage can be done, and the reputation and further funding opportunities before the site really ever gets up and starts flying. This is a comment from Sandy Ray, who actually showed up on Christmas Eve, 1987. Says the general public is really not aware of the crew's alert commitment. We need to impress upon the minds of the American public that we are proud of our job, motivation, and job satisfaction. Because of this, we are not merely pieces of the Department of Defense, we are the people. This is one of our bomb blast doors. We specialize in crowd control, urban renewal, and landscaping, parking lots extra. Great stuff. Thank you.
Who has the first question? Questions for Travis?
No questions? You have one?
With all the concerns that you have about the community accepting what you're doing with all this, are you trying to involve them in any way?
Very much.
Okay.
As of right now, like I said, last week, almost everything in here was completely outdated as of last week when we put on an envisioning session. Bringing in folks not only from the community, but also from Washington, D.C., Canada, Europe. I'm talking about Cold War history overall. But it's really about getting the base, the community back involved with this. Because if you don't have that base, especially with a project that's not funded by the state, it's not, this is just a lot of folks trying to get behind this to get this to work. So we really need them on the front end, and they are very involved on it now. But it's changing that mindset that is a problem, because they had been left behind for so long that it's going to be a slow process, but it's slowly starting to change.
Yeah, I run that Ronald Reagan Minuteman site up in North Dakota, but before that I worked with it's called the former Lincoln Air Force Base, then Lincoln, Nebraska, and there was a lot of similar things going on there. They closed the base. There was a lot of promises about to do something better, and there's a motivation involved right now about a new museum in Lincoln, not necessarily for the SAC base, but other features of aviation in Nebraska. But I just recently saw on Facebook somebody mentioned about that the Mohole, a possible name that might become the National Cold War Museum. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, I didn't know about that till last week.
Okay.
Not being involved in it, being more on the state side as just the historian for the project, sometimes I get left out of that discussion. So I walked into the envisioning session last week, and they're like, we're going to go, take it past just talking about the bombers in the KC-135s that sat on alert out here and take it one step farther. I sort of had the idea that if you're going to go big or go home. So they're seriously in contention, talking about more of a national scope on the Cold War itself, with the focus, being the B-52 and the KC-135, but doing both sides, and we sort of tossed around the idea that if you're going to talk about the Cold War, you need to have both sides. And we brought in some exhibitors to talk about not only the U.S.'s side of the Cold War, but bring in perspectives from the KGB and some of the Soviet Union in order to get that contrast on both sides. So it is an idea. I can't say that it's going to happen just yet, but that's what we're shooting for. That would be an interesting take on that. Damascus is itself its own fun explosion, but they are so far away that trying to get the two to be connected without doing some serious heritage tourism in order to catch those sites. We had 17 other Titan II sites within Arkansas, north central Arkansas. So most of those are gone. I went out and explored all of those within the last 6-7 months. All of those are private property now, and there's no access to get into those sites without owner permission. So I mean, it'd be difficult. It'd be great to do, but it would be difficult at this point.
And we have our last question.
I always thought the sign out the gate that said "Peace is our profession" was a Kubrick thing. But if you could capitalize on that, and if they have an old theater there, and you start running Dr. Strangelove for $5 a head, I think you could get some fundraising going.
Dr. Strangelove and Strategic Air Command. That's the hope.
Just along those lines, the Los Alamos Historical Society had a group of actors give the Reykjavik production a reading, but that also was, the meeting between Reagan and Gorbachev. So maybe involve your cultural people to also educate.
Yeah, we sort of had the same problem that Wyoming has, in that everything's stripped out of the inside of the building. Working with our folks in the Section 106 side of the office, Little Rock Air Force Base still has theirs. It didn't last very long as a SAC base before it transitioned over to TAC. They came to us not too long ago and said that they wanted to raise their building. And so we sort of worked out an agreement that we get first, the airport in Blytheville, we get first dibs on anything to come out of, sacrifice, water fountains and claxons and anything else that may be in there that we could use, pull out and put up there. And they gave us permission to do that. So we have a signed MOA with them looking at, taking stuff out of their building before they raise it. Because they are disappearing at a very fast rate off of many of our Air Force bases. What made ours a little bit more significant, in my opinion, compared to a lot of the other ones, is that we are completely intact. Almost nobody has the entrapment area, the fire team, the pool, the basketball court, any of the security gates. So we're a little more, pristine in that nature, a little run down, but we have all the pieces to it. Thank you.